Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new video. My name is Liv, and in this one we will dive deep into the story and characters of Bioshock. Instead of superficially focusing only on the story twist at the end of Act 2 or the specific catchphrase we all know by now, we will look at the story as a whole, analyze its flow and design, and see if it could have perhaps been done any differently. This will be a significantly longer video than what I have done so far. I have divided the video into several chapters which you can browse at your own convenience. You can find all chapters and their respective timestamp in the description below. At the end of this analysis, I hope we can all benefit by gaining a better understanding of not only how to write a good, engaging story, but more importantly, how to design it for the very special medium that is interactive entertainment, or more specifically, video games. Be warned, spoilers abound, so if you haven't experienced the Bioshock story firsthand, go ahead and do that first. Pause the video, I'll be here waiting for you once you're done. The game doesn't beat around the bush and starts right off mentioning that the action takes place sometime in the year 1960 and somewhere over the mid-Atlantic. The view fades into a very 1960s-like airplane aisle filled with cigarette smoke. Yes, smoking on airplanes was allowed back then. They told me, "Son, you special, probably a Midwestern family. You were born to do great things." We immediately see a present for Jack, so we assume that Jack is the name of our player character. The present also says, "Would you kindly not open until..." Our view is obstructed. "You know what? They were right," continues Jack. The view fades out after we see the interior of the airplane bump, and while the title appears, we can hear loud screams and hear the airplane losing altitude and presumably crashing. The transition of the logo is very interesting, from a silver Art Deco style image of a city skyline to a decrepit one, suggesting ruin, rust and decay. A first hint at a dream of utopia descending into a nightmare of decay, while we can hear the sound of the ocean waves in the background. As we ascend from the water, we can see personal belongings of the passengers falling to the bottom of the ocean, never to be seen again. Personal treasures forever buried at sea. We can also see the hull of the airplane Jack was in dropping violently. While Jack reaches the surface, gasping for air, we can see the result of the crash. Kerosene sparked up in violent flames across the ocean waves. We can see the plane was split in two and can only assume Jack is the sole survivor. An ominous-looking lighthouse is conspicuously overlooking the plane crash, so we might immediately ask ourselves, what is a lighthouse doing in the middle of the Atlantic? Upon entering the lighthouse, as the interior automatically lights up, we can see a large bronze bust of Andrew Ryan holding a banner that reads, "No gods, no kings, only man." Three porthole-shaped frames hold three coin-like illustrations: science, represented by a lighthouse and electricity, industry and art. We can then enter what will be our main transport between levels, a so-called bathysphere. The bathysphere, from Greek bathos, deep, and sphaira, sphere. The bathysphere was a unique spherical deep-sea submersible which was unpowered and lowered into the ocean on a cable, and was used to conduct a series of dives off the coast of Bermuda from 1930 to 1934, so this actually happened. The game lacks any interactivity for now, as this introduction is made to keep us on very strict rails, while the game will start throwing totally alien concepts at the new player. The designers did not want the player to veer off into unexpected directions, and this is akin to the introduction to the first Half-Life game, where the protagonist, Gordon Freeman, visits the Black Mesa compound in a literally on-the-rails tour, locked in a cable car, but able to look around along the entire tour. We begin submerging, and first we get a sense of the depth. 10 fathoms is about 18 meters, so around 6 feet. 18 fathoms, 42 meters, 11 feet. So we can assume immediately, even without knowing this, that we are descending quite rapidly. The obstruction of our view was decided while designing the game, as the creators wanted us to gasp in awe when the underwater city of Rapture was first revealed to us, and also to hide some possible discrepancies in the architecture of the city or the ocean floor, which could be immediately spotted otherwise. We get to see a short film similar to a World War II propaganda movie reel. We can see the emblem of the city Rapture represented by the lighthouse we just entered a couple of minutes ago. Like all good commercial movie reels, this one starts off with an ad. For the incinerate plasmid? What is that? What's a plasmid? The question gets planted into the player's brain. Apparently, you can light an attractive lady's cigarette by using your fingertip. That's cool, I guess, so where can I buy this thing? We also see that these plasmid thingies are manufactured by Ryan Industries. So is this the same guy back at the entrance to the lighthouse? He now talks to us in a very posh English accent and gives us the elevator pitch of his philosophy and the reason behind building Rapture. Says something along the lines, is a man not entitled to the sweat of his brow? No, says the man in Washington, the government. It belongs to the poor. No, says the man in the Vatican, the church. It belongs to God. No, says the man in Moscow, the communists. It belongs to everyone. He continues, I rejected. Instead, I chose something different. I chose the impossible. I chose Rapture, a city where the artists will be uncensored, where the scientist will not be bound by petty morality, where the great would not be constrained by the small. And with the sweat of your brow, he continues, Rapture can become your city as well. We can assume, just like in Ayn Rand's book, Atlas Shrugged, that Ryan would invite promising prospects to visit the city first and decide if they wanted to stay or not. This was supposed to be the grand tour then. Well, we are in for something else of a tour, alright? Upon approaching the entrance, we can also see a Big Daddy for the first time. The design decision of showing us the entire sprawling city at first was meant to show us the grand scheme of things, even though we are mostly visiting linear levels in a sequence. It makes us think there are many more stories left untold in this large city. Maybe even a queuing for an eventual Bioshock 2, eh? We can hear some voices, a man and a woman, communicating over radio about the plane crash that just happened, and mentioning something about a splicer in a thick Irish accent. That is because there is a radio attuned to their frequency, conveniently placed in the bathysphere we are in. Is this still part of the tour? The voice of what will soon be known to us as Atlas concludes, that means we have company, just as the bathysphere reaches the destination. As we ascend, we can see some more plasmid commercials, 1960s personalized products, and the me generation. Let the good times roll. Lights are out, and the guy the radio voice calls Johnny is attacked and brutally murdered by a woman wearing hooks in her hands just by sheer force. The lighting effects are terrifying. This disfigured woman asks in a blood-curdling, shrilling voice, "Is it someone new?" Apparently she cannot see us yet. She then lets out a loud shriek. So, wait, is this a horror game? I did not sign up for this. But Bioshock does have a lot of horror elements in it, right? She then proceeds to try and open the container we are in, the bathysphere. We can only assume we don't want that, right? What to do? Jack is trapped inside and has no weapon to defend himself. She eventually retreats just as Atlas is first contacting us over the service radio of the bathysphere. So that radio would have been used as a kind of elevator service alarm, I suppose, but its frequency was hacked by these Irish guys, so what could be happening here? This is a great first design move to not have a weapon from the start of the game. Remember how glad you were when you first got a hold of the first weapon in Half-Life, the crowbar? So Atlas asks if we would kindly pick up that radio. He's such a polite chap. He tells us he aims to keep us alive and immediately tells us we're going to have to trust him. So he tries to establish trust from the get-go. And how could we not trust him in that lovely Irish accent he has? So apparently Atlas hacked a sentry bot to attack the splicer, or at least to drive her off. We are still unarmed, so Atlas asked if you could kindly find a crowbar or something. A crowbar would have been too obviously Half-Life-esque. Plus, this is the spiritual successor to System Shock 2, so the first weapon we get is obviously going to be the wrench. So Johnny was indeed one of Atlas's men, and we just witnessed him being eviscerated by the zombie monster lady. Apparently, they are called splicers. Before picking up the wrench, we hear another voice, this time a male one, apparently talking to himself in a somewhat mentally challenged way? Or mad way. Who could be knocking at my door? He says. We can immediately see if these are not zombies or some alien monsters. They seem smart, they talk articulately, they are dressed well, but they are disfigured and are acting totally batshit. Plasmids again, this time a large neon sign indicating us the direction. We must be getting warm. I can't wait to see what these plasmids are. It's marketing done right. Product placement everywhere. We pick something up called the Electro Bolt. We can assume we will then be able to electrocute enemies with this ability, so they don't jump us from around the corner like that guy downstairs just did. So this injection, which contains Adam, we will later find out, rewrites our genetic code. Wow, that must really hurt. So much is obvious by looking at this animation. We then have a closer look at the splicers. So they are disfigured and wearing something that looks like carnival or boar masks. This one has a cat-shaped one. We then see the Big Daddy up close, not unlike the one we saw earlier, while descending in the bathysphere. However, in the next frame we can see he's not alone this time. With him is a 6-year-old girl with glowing eyes, calling this big Frankenstein, like Brute, she's calling him Mr. Bubbles. At first she thinks Jack is dead, but then can see he is still breathing. This just keeps on getting weirder and weirder. This does not look like a place for kids, so what the heck is happening here? Did Jack just inject some hard drugs into his arm? The little girl has a big syringe containing the same growing liquid we just injected into our arm. So it looks like she's collecting that liquid, which we understand is called Adam. We then immediately have to use the electrobolt plasmid to open doors with short-circuited switches, one of its secondary and helpful uses. Science. So you see how the developer gives us different uses for each ability we get immediately afterwards. The bathysphere descended quite quickly indeed, as the second broken half of the plane, which was starting to sink as we were making our way to the lighthouse, has reached the bottom of the ocean, crashing into the tunnel we are in and flooding it. We actually passed the seat we were occupying just a short while earlier, while making our way forward. Atlas is telling us of another use of the electrobolt plasmid, the Zap 'em then Whack 'em 1-2 punch. So we can first shock and paralyze the splicers, then whack 'em with the wrench. This brings the combat to a more level field with the splicers then. We can already see the small progression the player character is making, something we can expect for the rest of the game. Something specific to immersive sims, as they are not only shooters, but also contain RPG elements. We can see a splicer on fire, so the player assumes if they can shock them, they can also set them on fire with the incinerate plasmid teased as in Ryan's short film from the tour. Something to look forward to then. We seem to be caught in a larger plot here, as Atlas reveals to us that he has a family hiding in a level called Neptune's Bounty in the city, and he is counting on us to save them. So maybe the lady he was talking to on the radio was his wife? Another concept of Ryan's is the Great Chain. This is very similar to Adam Smith's Invisible Hand. Ryan is a proponent of free markets with no government interference. The Great Chain is a metaphor for supply and demand adjusting themselves, as Adam Smith's Invisible Hand is guiding the market participants and not the government. They just set themselves up by default, based on supply and demand. We then enter the Kashmir Restaurant, another important area of the introduction, meant to get us deeper into the plot behind what happened in Rapture. This sets up the architecture clearly as Art Deco, with an Atlas statue holding the world on its shoulders. Ken Levine stated he got the inspiration for the Art Deco style by visiting the Rockefeller Center in New York, where a similar Atlas statue can be found. the 40 Rockefeller Plaza, also where the series 40 Rock takes place. So Atlas confirms that plasmids made the people crazy, so they were people before splicing their DNA using plasmids. Adam, the substance plasmids are made from, is highly addictive and affects both the body and the mind. For example, this lady splicer probably strangled her own baby in the crib and is instead singing a lullaby to a revolver. It's the second weapon we get in the game, and it's nicely set up, you know. It's memorable. In the Kashmir Restaurant we can see a sign saying Happy New Year 1959, and the splicers we've seen by now are all dressed for a chic party, wearing carnival masks even. So maybe something happened during this New Year's Eve party? We can only assume. An attentive player can see the first little sister up close here, but we cannot interact with her yet. We only see her eyes glowing in the dark. For some reason, Jack is also seeing ghosts. Ghosts are another way to give the player bits and pieces of what happened, besides the audio recordings they will find lying around throughout the game. Bioshock never tells a story outright, but instead leaves much to the player's imagination as to what exactly happened in this place, at least until much later in the game. Careful now, would you kindly lower that weapon for a minute? This section is meant to explain to us exactly what the Little Sisters are. They are young girls who collect Adam, a very precious resource from dead bodies, but they are not little girls anymore. They sneak around in an interconnected air vent system only they can get in, like the one the first little sister was looking at us from, or maybe it's the same one. As everybody wants and needs this resource, think of the splicers like some crazy junkies who want to kill little sisters off to get their fix. The Big Daddy is their guardian then, protecting the little sisters from getting preyed upon by robbers and killers. This is quite an impressive display of power, and of course we assume you are going to fight these walking, running bulwarks at some point. As Jack is not strong enough to tow it with a Big Daddy just yet, we get to observe from a safe distance through an armored glass. This splicer has a rabbit-shaped mask, so we can assume these people went totally crazy with the plasmids during the New Year's Eve party in 1959, and the city rapidly descended into the maw of madness, only for us to find it taken over by entropy and chaos a bit over a year later. Yet another use of the electrobolt, Atlas tells us, is by shocking multiple splicers and killing them if they are standing in water. You can see just for this first plasmid how many uses it has, making combat dynamic based upon player preference, character build and playstyle. Combat in Bioshock can be done in multiple different ways, and this right here is teaching us to always mind our surroundings, as the environment plays a big part in choosing our tactics for each fight. We are meant to go directly to Neptune's bounty, as Atlas instructs us, in order to save his family. However, the door gets shut off, as if somebody does not want us here. And I do not mean the splicers, but actually a sane, rational person. The alarm set off seems to alert all nearby splicers to our presence and they rush to attack us. Atlas confirms that it was Ryan shutting off the gate and setting off the alarm, so that means there are still people left uninfected in the city. Atlas directs us to another area, the medical pavilion, in order to eventually reach Neptune's bounty. Before finishing the intro level off, we get a live one-on-one with Ryan, who suspects us to be a KGB or CIA spy. Ryan was not popular with either government, and that shouldn't surprise us considering his whole philosophy and his great chain bit. Atlas manages to open the door to the medical pavilion in the nick of time, and we get out of there just as the room we were standing in gets invaded by splicers. The paragon of the medical pavilion is actually a cosmetic enhancement facility run by one Dr. Steinman. We are greeted by an ad for this facility right upon entering the level. Throughout the entire game we will find audio logs made by several characters we do not meet in person. Each of these characters has their own story the player is left to piece together from the audio logs they can find, many of them hidden away from plain sight. One of these characters is Diane McClintock. She was Andrew Ryan's mistress before the period of the Civil War in Rapture. We'll find out more about her later. She was hurt in the attack on the Kashmir Restaurant during the 1959 New Year's party and visited Dr. Steinman to treat her disfigurement. A ghost starts to reveal that while Steinman was a brilliant aesthetic surgeon at first, he gradually went mad and started disfiguring patients in a constant pursuit of what he calls symmetry in his audio journals. This could explain why so many of the splicers we encountered are in fact disfigured, with many of them also wearing masks to hide their disfigurement. So Steinman claims the Greek goddess of beauty, Aphrodite, was speaking to him. We see him clearly gone mad, repeatedly stabbing a patient because she does not turn beautiful and instead turns out wrong. We can see corpses hanging on the walls, previously failed attempts of Steinman to achieve the symmetrical beauty standard he pursues. One is too fat, he says, one is too tall, and then he sees us, the intruder, which he deems too ugly. With Steinman dead, we can open the emergency access to Port Neptune, where we should find Atlas's family and meet him as well, as he will be coming to Port Neptune from the other side as well. As Big Daddies are still too strong for Jack to fight off directly, the first encounter where we can actually interact with a little sister is presented without having to defeat her guardian. Someone else has already done this for us, other splicers probably. This is not exactly explained in the game, but we get to learn it from some audio logs of Dr. Tenenbaum, this lady. She created the little sisters by implanting the atom secreting sea slug into their stomach. So in order to get the atom they collected, one must extract the sea slug from the little girl's stomach, a process they cannot survive, the game tells us. So this is the first moral dilemma out of many in the game, and is a well thought out illusion of choice. In the grand scheme of things, whether we exercise, that means save the little girls, the little sisters, or we outright kill them for Adam, we only change the game ending cinematic, nothing else. The recordings are from my second playthrough, where I harvest all little sisters to see the evil ending. In the first one, in the first playthrough, I saved all little sisters, but the changes to the game plot are minimal, close to none. Of course, the new player does not know this and will most likely try to save the girl. That was my first instinct as well. We open the emergency access to Port Neptune, and this short level, meant to be an extension of the intro and tutorial, is done, and the plot really starts to take off from here. A lynched body hung to the wall with the label Smuggler is a reminder of the events that have taken place all over Rapture, and also the smugglers, we'll see. Jack finds himself caught in the aftermath of the civil war between Andrew Ryan and his main competitor Frank Fontaine. Fontaine ran an illegal smuggling ring, bringing items from the surface into Rapture that the residents still longed for. This jeopardized Rapture itself, according to Ryan, as the smuggling would pinpoint the exact location of Rapture to the outside world and presumably also affected the local production in Rapture. Fontaine Fisheries is where Fontaine began as a businessman of Rapture. One of the dock workers for Fontaine Fisheries got his hand hurt while working, triggering a series of events that would lead to the discovery of Adam and the invention of plasmids. So what happened? Dr. Tenenbaum discovered a sea slug which naturally secreted and could store Adam, and this substance miraculously healed the injured worker's hand, leading to Tenenbaum's Adam research, working for Fontaine himself. We now meet a character called Peach Wilkins, whose role is to introduce us to the research camera. It's a tool that allows for character progression. By taking pictures of enemies, we can increase our combat effectiveness about that specific enemy type. The events leading to acquiring the research camera and learning how to use it are not my favorite part of the game, and we can see that Peach is only a transient character made especially for this part of the game, to introduce the camera to us. The developers had to somehow streamline character progression in order to make the game accessible for consoles and playing with a controller. And the research camera was the solution they came up with. So we didn't clutter the progression interface, and instead we would take photos and become more effective against enemies. We get introduced to the most powerful type of splicer in Bioshock, the spider splicer. This is the same type of splicer we encountered when first surfacing to Rapture in the bathysphere, the one who killed Atlas' comrade Johnny. Spider splicers can crawl on walls and ceilings while dealing range damage by throwing hooks at us. The research camera is introduced in this way as Jack is not strong enough yet to defeat spider splicers outright. So he needs to do a bit of research on them first. We can see Peach is skeptical of us as he is not 100% convinced that we are working for Atlas and not for Fontaine himself. Atlas reveals to us that Fontaine is dead, killed by Ryan's splicers in a direct confrontation on the streets of Rapture. Both men seem to be equally ruthless in their tactics to eliminate their competitors. We now get the camera and our new objective is to photograph 3 spider splicers in 3 preset locations. This is our next mission, so to speak. The second splicer gave me the most trouble as he is supposed to be in a hotel room above the Fighting McDonald's Tavern. However, in both playthroughs I did, the actual room was empty. It's probably a scripting bug, according to the information I found out on the internet. This is a serious game-breaking bug. I would have expected to be fixed in a remastered edition released 9 years after the release of the original game. If you get this bug and you get stuck, what you can do is photograph the spider splicer appearing just as you open the door to the Fighting McDonald's Tavern for the first time, before he jumps into an air vent and disappears. And also save the game often and reload save games, because it crashes a lot. I suppose the same splicer is supposed to appear in the hotel room, but for me he never did and I could not progress the story otherwise. So save the game often and keep your save games to get back to them if you need to, if you get stuck. The third and final spider splicer is in the postal office. The spider splicer research is now done and Peachy will let us into the Fontaine fisheries. Would you kindly head on back to the Fontaine fisheries, asks Atlas. Peachy makes us leave our weapons behind before entering the fisheries because he can't take away our plasmids. This area also helps the new player get more familiar with using plasmids without relying on weapons to fend off their enemies. So this is a design choice as well. Using plasmids only also makes us more aware of the surrounding environment and how to use it to our advantage. For example, we can electrify water, use TK telekinesis to throw off gasoline-filled barrels that explode upon impact, or set puddles of gasoline on fire to set traps. Fontaine Fisheries was a front for a smuggling ring, using submarines to bring merchandise from the surface to Rapture, and the smuggling ring was run by Frank Fontaine. Peachy is trying to kill us because he thinks we are working for Fontaine, and not for Atlas. His motives remain unclear, however. We can only assume he became paranoid due to prolonged Adam use and too much seclusion. We can assume Fontaine wants Peach dead, as he has taken over the fisheries with Fontaine supposedly dead. Fontaine was trying to squeeze out a profit from the fisheries smuggling ring with typical mobster practices. When one of the smugglers wanted to go to the police, he was found with his throat slit, and he might just be the one crucified to the wall where we first got up the bathysphere and entered the Neptune's bounty level. With Peach dead as the boss for the Neptune's bounty level, we can call it a boss, it's time to move on to meet Atlas himself. Throughout the game, Jack has these flashes of his family and his family's home in the Midwest. We don't know what these mean yet, but they seem ominous enough, and further the mystery. Peach's diary reveals the growing divide in Rapture's upper and lower society. It seems that this city isn't only populated by artists, industry magnates, and top scientists. After all, somebody still needs to do the grunt work, like gutting fish in this example for the fisheries. And the blue-collar worker class seem to have grown disgruntled with this societal divide, which resembled more the outside world they were running from than Ryan's promises of the great chain and fair free markets and free capitalism. Fontaine seemed to win more and more people to his cause, joining his rebellion against Ryan. Fontaine was just another unscrupulous businessman at the end of the day, but he won over blue-collar workers who could not identify with Ryan's elite rich lifestyle. Ryan warns us that if we press the button to let Atlas in, we will learn, I quote, what it means to truly be his enemy. Maybe Atlas is using us to get his forces into Rapture proper and get to Ryan? We'll have to find out. We can see Atlas down near the bathysphere where his wife and kid are holed up. Ryan is using his own army of splicers to kill Atlas. In one of the first truly tragic moments of the story, we see the submarine blowing up. We then assume Ryan killed Atlas' family in cold blood and makes us see Ryan as the antagonist. This moment builds up the hate against Ryan and the desire to face him up and repay the debt in blood. The Smuggler's Hideout is a very short transition level, one made to conclude the first act of the story and open up the second act. We now know we have to and want to reach Ryan and kill him to avenge the murder of Atlas' family and the fall of Rapture altogether. It is revealed in the audio diaries that the ghosts Jack keeps seeing are a side effect of Atom use, as the genetic material contained in the atom the little sisters are gathering from dead bodies also carry over some of the dead's memories from when they were alive. We are supposed to get to Rolling Hills in Arcadia in order to reach Ryan's home. Arcadia is a forest at the bottom of the ocean, built by Ryan and mainly used for producing oxygen for Rapture's inhabitants to breathe. In order to stop us from moving on, he kills the trees by using some kind of lethal gas. In order to progress further, we then need to stop the gas from being pumped into the forest. Rapture's botanist and the woman who engineered Arcadia is Julie Langford, who might just have a way to save the trees. It's this genetic vector thingamajig. Again, we have 3 tasks to complete. Many story quests in Bioshock have 3 objectives to attain, usually in any order the player likes. This gives an illusion of non-linearity. In this case, we need to gather the ingredients for the Lazarus vector in order to progress the story. Ryan kills Langford as well. We can see just how ruthless he is to his former business associates. Of course, all these actions have the effect of the player hating him even more and wanting to reach his home as soon as possible to kill him. We can see Act 2 as a way to move the story along, but with significantly less pressure than the first act. The player knows the mechanics of the game by now and has the beautiful level of Arcadia to take in, explore the sights, and enjoy the game. After gathering distilled water, chlorophyll solution, and some B enzyme, we can produce the Lazarus vector and move in on Orion. In an audio log of Dr. Tenenbaum, we can see that although she created the little sisters from normal little girls, destroying their lives, she gets emotionally attached to the little sisters as if they were her own children. Another theory on why the splicers wear masks comes from Atlas. Maybe the splicers remember how they used to look before becoming deformed by the atom abuse, and they are ashamed. We find out that Atom destroys native cells and replaces them with unstable stem versions. This causes a massive cellular instability in the organism, driving the user to want more Atom to keep his cells stable, all the while repeating the process, making more and more of their native cells unstable. So it's the perfect addictive drug, giving its users great speed, agility, and plasmid powers to boot. So Diane McClintock was a woman from the high society, since she also was Ryan's mistress. As Ryan never came back for her, she left Steinman's surgery office once she felt better, and would not believe her own eyes upon seeing what the city has become for its everyday citizens, as she was insulated from the everyday life in Rapture. She would find out more about how her former Ryan was training splicers to kill innocent citizens and turning the Central Apollo Square into a containment camp for prisoners of the brewing civil war between Atlas's rebel forces, as Fontaine was now dead, and Ryan. We start seeing the Who is Atlas posters popping up as to who is this mysterious rebel leader, and a direct reference to the famous Who is John Galt message from Ayn Rand's book Atlas Shrugged. Something I touched upon in a previous video I made. Tenenbaum confirms in an audio log that the little sisters have awoken the maternal instinct in her. She both feels hatred and regret towards her actions in robbing these girls of their childhood and their chance at a normal life. Not unlike the German scientists she mentions during and after the Second World War on the surface. Deep wounds that will never fully heal. The market is patient. This is one of the most important messages related to Ryan's ideology and part of why Rapture fell: the deregulation of the plasmid business. In Ryan's society, any form of government intrusion was in no way wanted, as he believed in totally free markets. Although the warning signs were there, as plasmids had atrocious side effects up to and including death, he believed the market is fair, and that Rapture citizens had to be patient and endure. Of course, this did not stop this callous businessman to use plasmids in order to build his own army of bloodthirsty craze splicers for him to control against his opponents. This is what both Ryan and Fontaine did: build their own splicer armies. Another major mistake Ryan made, again according to his own laissez-faire capitalistic view, was not take a hold of Fontaine's business exploits earlier. He would encourage any competitor to rise up using any means necessary, as long as the supply-demand cycle would allow them to, so the great chain. This is what made Fontaine become not only a fierce competitor, but a dangerous adversary, leading eventually to an all-out civil war and the implosion of the city from within. Back to more pressing and present matters, we finally used the Lazarus Vector to clear up the gas and get the doors unsealed. Of course, Ryan does not like that one bit and sends off his splicers to try and fend us off. Next up is Ryan's house. It's time for blood, Atlas tells us. Fort Frolic. Fort Frolic is Rapture's gambling center, and we must cross it in order to reach the bathysphere to Ryan's house. It's like Las Vegas at the bottom of the ocean, I guess. We find out that Fort Frolic has been handed by Ryan to one Sander Cohen, an artist type and a sheer psychopath, according to Atlas. It seems Cohen will not let us leave until playing his little game and spending an evening with him, whatever that entails. This level is one of my favorite parts of the game, and it's an unforgettable experience from level design to the character of Cohen himself. It seems we will have to play Cohen's little game first if you want to move on to Ryan's house proper. He has also jammed the communication with both Atlas and Ryan, so it's just us, him, and the classical music playing throughout the level tonight. So Atlas and Ryan cannot communicate to us over radio. We can only hear Sander Cohen in this level. We can immediately see that Cohen, beyond his artiste flamboyant personality, is actually outright insane. He blows some guy up because he's not satisfied with his piano playing. He wants us to take a photo of the dead pianist Fitzpatrick and place it upon his masterpiece, as he calls it. Apparently, he's testing us by hunting down former disciples of him who started questioning his artistic direction, probably for good reason, yeah? Every time we kill one of them, we have to photograph the dead body and place it upon the quadratic. It has 4 parts. Finnegan, one of the disciples, dies off easily enough, and we can use the final weapon in the game we just got, the crossbow, to finish him off. One thing I want to mention here as a bug that occurred in my first playthrough, preventing me from continuing the game. As I was missing the right save game to go back, I had to restart the entire Fort Frolic level, so beware. The last 2 disciples you have to kill after Finnegan are Cobb and Rodriguez. Go for Cobb first and Rodriguez after. Follow the objectives laid out to you in the hints window. You will find Rodriguez in the titty bar, where you will also find a big story reveal. I killed Rodriguez first and then Cobb, and Cobb would not go through his scripted routine, summoning some spider splicers first, before Nerven gets unlocked, giving us access back up. So he didn't do his routine. This is the second game-breaking bug and a very negative experience for me. I wasn't expecting in my first playthrough. So the titty bar is called Eve's Garden. It's a dancer place, well, you get the idea. The star of the show is one Jasmine Jolene, as revealed by the ghosts. However, the only 2 protagonists in this scene are her and Andrew Ryan. How could we then have this memory? The player gets their first sense of doubt in the events Atlas is laying out to us. As Atlas cannot reach us by radio, he had not planned for Jack to visit this place at all. We find out Jolene was murdered by Ryan's men, overselling her fertilized egg to Fontaine. Jolene was also about to have Ryan's child, and she sold the embryo to Frank Fontaine for money. When Ryan finds out, he had her killed. Upon entering her bedroom where everything happened, Jack has again a flash of his family photo, this time focusing on the mother. This is pretty obvious. The implications are evident. It seems that Jolene is Jack's mother. So it appears that Jolene was paid by Fontaine to seduce Ryan in getting her pregnant, and after that sell the embryo to him, to Fontaine. Once his masterpiece is complete, Sandercon makes his entrance, stepping down the stairs as for his grand gala premiere. Totally batshit crazy if you ask me. Atlas regains the frequency emission for our radio and tells us he's been trying to raise Jack for a dog's age, I quote. This is unsettling, especially as in the loading screens we keep seeing the message of the late Dr. Souchong, who was also working for Fontaine, doing research on accelerated growth for children. Would you kindly go to Hephaestus, Ryan's home? He politely asks us. Hephaestus. Andrew Ryan is not only an industry magnate, but a brilliant electrical engineer. The designers wanted to reflect this in his home, which was also the main electrical plant powering the entire city. Andrew Ryan's home was also his place of work. The electrical plant would capture heat from the volcanic core beneath the plant and turn it into electricity, powering the entire city of Rapture. The orange hues also contrast the previous levels and the ocean itself, and suggest an aura of evil as we were suddenly in hell. Hephaestus was in Greek mythology a titan not unlike Atlas, and this titan tricked Zeus, stealing fire from the gods and giving it to humans. So it's a symbol for technological progress. Atlas reveals to us also that Ryan has the genetic key to Rapture, and apparently if we get it, we can get out of the city. Ryan indeed could program machines in the city structure to only respond to his genetic makeup. Ryan does not seem spliced up, as he maintains his lucidity and seems rational enough. His cold, calculated ruthlessness is however visible in the grotesque display of the remains of his former enemies hanging up from the walls as trophies. One of the corpses contains an audio diary of one Anja Annarsdottir, a grieving mother who lost her girl. Presumably she became a little sister. She tried to assassinate Ryan but got caught and killed. She was not an assassin, just a shoe seller in a store. But because she lost her girl, she tried to assassinate Ryan and paid the price for it. She is now hanging from his wall, and there we find her audio journal, and as we try to find a way to enter Ryan's office. Ryan seems incapable of accepting his failures that eventually doomed Rapture. He truly honestly believes that shops and schools are reopening and that Rapture will thrive, with Jack there to hinder his plans, and that is why he's trying to eliminate Jack. He thinks he will lead the parade at the city reopening. He's just deluding himself, right? Another multi-part quest will have us search for parts to assemble an EMP, electromagnetic pulse bomb, that will supposedly disable the electric plant core in order to short-circuit and open the door to Ryan's office and hideout. Ryan's words seem to plant even more doubt in the player's mind. How come Jack was the sole survivor of that plane crash, and how did the plane crash land precisely over Rapture's exact location? According to Bill McDonough, Rapture's general contractor under Ryan, Fontaine orchestrated the attack on New Year's Eve 1959, even after his own death, as his splicers started a surprise attack on the city, and he sold plasmids to the disgruntled poor citizens to turn them into splicers, to the poor. Overloading the core, Ryan tells us Atlas will stab us in the back once the deed is done. You don't even know who to believe here. Ryan implies that Jack was created with a lot of effort put in. We can now enter Ryan's office. Rapture Central Control. Ryan reveals to us that Jack is indeed his genetic son. This is why the defenses in Rapture Central Control do not respond to Jack, do not attack him, as he has the same genetic makeup as Ryan. We can assume from what we found out in Eve's garden that Jasmine Jolene was his biological mother, and Ryan his biological father. Similar to Ayn Rand's protagonist in her novel The Fountainhead, the architect Howard Rourke, who would rather destroy the building he created than let it fall into the wrong hands, Ryan also programmed the core of the plan to self-destruct and destroy the entire city, with us in it. In the final scene of the reveal build-up, we can see a picture of Jake here with his natural parents, Jasmine, Jolene and other Ryan, and 2 audio diaries by Dr. Suhong of Jack as a child being mind-controlled by the phrase "would you kindly" into breaking his own puppy's neck. These also confirm that Jack was raised over a short period of time, as when he was 1 year old, he was already weighing 58 pounds, 29 kilograms, and he had the musculature of a 19-year-old, a 1-year-old child.
The assassin has overcome my final defense, and now he's come to murder me. In the end, what separates a man from a slave? Money? Power? No. A man chooses. A slave obeys. You think you have memories. A farm. A family. An airplane. A crash. And then this place. Was there really a family? Did that airplane crash? Or was it hijacked? Forced down. Forced down by something less than a man, something bred to sleepwalk through life until they are activated by a simple phrase spoken by their kindly master. Was a man sent to kill, or a slave? A man chooses. A slave obeys. Come in. Stop, would you kindly? Would you kindly? Powerful phrase. Familiar phrase.
Would you kindly? Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find that? Would you kindly find? Would you kindly get this? Would you kindly head to Ryan's office and kill the son of a bitch?
Sit, would you kindly? Stand, would you kindly? Run! Stop! Turn. A man chooses. A slave obeys. Kill! A man chooses! A slave obeys! Obey!
Atlas tells us to kindly get Ryan's genetic key and put it in the machine to stop the core from self-destructing. The player now realizes how helpless they were from the beginning, and how their actions and how little what they believed to be their choices actually mattered in the great scheme of things and in influencing the game's storyline. So Atlas finally reveals himself as Frank Fontaine, who staged his death and disguised himself as the rebel little Atlas, moving forward to stage the coup that Jack was the main pawn in. So Atlas was just Fontaine with, some overalls, just a disguise. As the security gets activated by the new owner of the place, a former little sister who was cured shows us the way to escape. This concludes Act 2 of the game, with the final act, the third act, remaining, and everything we thought we knew about Rapture, Jack, Atlas and Ryan turned upside down and our minds irrevocably blown. Olympus Heights. Jack wakes up in Dr. Tenenbaum's safe house, somewhere in the residential area of Rapture. We can see she adopted the little sister she managed to save, which she now calls her little ones. Depending on whether Jack himself was good to them or not, they have a different reaction to him, purely for cosmetic purposes and not affecting gameplay or the story in any way. Of course, Tenenbaum knew from the beginning who Jack was, as she was responsible for research together with Dr. Sushang, both of them working for Fontaine from the beginning. While Sushang was killed, she survived, and we can gather from her audio diaries that she was overcome with remorse for the things she has done in the name of science, this being one of the primary reasons she is helping Jack in the first place. In the first part of Act 3, Jack has to completely break free from Fontaine's mental control over him. In order to find out more on how his mind was designed, he will have to find Dr. Suhong's research on mental control in his flat in Mercury Suites. Well, since the jig is up on the "would you kindly" phrase, as Dr. Tenenbaum managed to remove that control form from Jack's brain, Fontaine resorts to another one, Code Yellow. This one progressively lowers Jack's maximum health, giving the player a sense of urgency to escape Fontaine's control over them, as otherwise Jack will eventually suffer a cardiac arrest and die. We can see the actual central residential area of Rapture for the first time, which actually starts to look more of a city than a totally alien place to us. We can see the results of civil unrest and fighting in the streets, including barricades made out of household items, pillows. This urban area also gives me a Fallout 3 vibe, with shades of green from the ocean and brown from the rust and dirt painting the screen. We find out from one of Suhong's diaries that there is an actual antidote to the mental control plasmid called Lot 192. The irony is that the antidote was commissioned by Fontaine himself, out of fear that the mental control plasmid might turn against him at some point, compromising his illegal affairs. Apparently nobody knew about this antidote except Suhong and Fontaine himself. Not even Tenenbaum knew about this, or so she says. Tenenbaum stole a sample of Lot 192 from Suhong's lab, not knowing what exactly it was for, and she's keeping it in her former flat. This is where we have to go next. There were also other residents living in this area, one of them being Senator Cohen. This area allows us to go and visit some of her abandoned, dilapidated flats, now inhabited by squatting armed splicers, and get a glimpse on how the people who had chosen this city used to live. Even Fontaine called Olympus Heights his home and had a flat there. We find out the combination key for his lock from an audio diary held by a paparazzi, who thought Fontaine had a fling with Tenenbaum because he saw them together, plotting, of course. Tenenbaum's apartment was ransacked by Fontaine's goons, and apparently they took the Lot 192 sample to his penthouse. So this is where we will have to go next. Fontaine confirms that Tenenbaum's place was ransacked right after she started to grow a conscience. Tenenbaum is the archetypal scientist who, either unknowingly or intentionally keeping a blind eye, has done terrible things in the name of science, like many before her. Her newfound conscience makes her regret her past, but tries to keep an eye to the future and maybe redeem herself. Fontaine's objective is to escape Rapture with all the Adam he can get his hands on, and use his power and his splicer army to overtake the surface world. He is your typical mobster character, obsessed by power and doing anything to have more of it. We find the first Lot 192 sample, we will have to find a second one to completely escape Fontaine's control. Now that we are halfway through, funny mechanic happens. We no longer have any control over which plasmid to select. The active plasmid switches randomly based on which ones we have in our plasmid slots. The more reliable option, of course, is to use only weapons until we find the second sample and cure ourselves completely. We will find the second sample in the Suhong's labs in Artemis suits. The whole Olympus Heights is at the top of Rapture, and we can see areas being named after Greek mythology as well. Apollo Square, the Artemis suites, and so on and so forth. The danger is that when there are no gods and kings, only men, as Rand's banner in the Lighthouse said, people will try to become gods themselves. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche famously wrote in Beyond Good and Evil, and I quote, "Beware that when fighting monsters, you yourself do not become a monster. For when you gaze long into the abyss gazes also into you." So there are no gods or kings here, just men with big egos. Just men with big egos. We now find ourselves in Apollo Square, a place where Ryan unleashed his splicers to decimate Rapture citizens who sided with Atlas in the Civil War. A lot of blood has been shed here. We can see a banner for Fontaine's Helping Hands. Helping Hands, an orphanage for little girls, and a home for the poor. In reality, he funded these places only to turn those girls into little sisters with the help of Dr. Tenenbaum, and to create an army of splicers by getting poor people hooked up on Adam. Then he created the persona of Atlas by disguising himself in a rebel defending the cause of the poor working class, who felt they were being oppressed by Rapture's elite, represented by Andrew Ryan. This is why the utopia of unfettered capitalism would never work, as true equality is in itself a myth. This is why collectivism also failed, as it promised true equality, but it ended up with everyone being equally poor, at the same time being exploited by a minority of oligarchs, as history shows us. The place is littered with photographs of missing persons, especially of little girls who were kidnapped and presumably turned into little sisters. We find the second and last sample of Lot 192 regaining complete control over our mind, free from Fontaine's grasp. That does not mean the player gets to choose from now on though. He is still a pawn in the developer's story, so we can only go ahead doing exactly what Tenenbaum now tells us to do in order to progress with the story. So we found ourselves a new master, that's all. We will have to go to Point Prometheus in order for, and I quote, "this matter to be settled." Fontaine is also beginning to sow doubt in our mind as to why is Tenenbaum exactly helping us, and if she would be trying to take advantage of us in any way. The remainder of the story focuses on how does a normal person, a normal man, get turned into a big daddy, and the big daddy little sister relationship. Just another in a series of experiments turned horribly wrong. We find out that the big daddies were being conditioned to imprint on the specific little sisters they were meant to protect, much like apes or birds or any other elements. Big daddies themselves were also real persons before volunteering for a program turning them into these seemingly mindless Frankenstein hulks. So they were real persons before. Fontaine reveals to us that he has all the Adam in the city, and that he is in a submarine preparing to go to the surface world. In order to survive and beat Fontaine, but also in order to control little sisters to open unbreakable doors for you, Tenenbaum tells you to turn yourself into a big daddy. Okay, that's unexpected. You will need to find a big daddy armor and then make yourself smell and sound like a big daddy. This does seem a little suspicious from a story point of view, and Fontaine is only fueling our doubt. But as anything Bioshock, you don't really get to choose and can only do what you're told in order to progress with the story and see what will happen in the end. The lack of choice is the leitmotif of the entire Bioshock series actually. It is really fascinating how, even if Jack is now technically free to choose, his mental conditioning is still determining him to simply follow orders and do what he is told. A temporary waste storage reveals a place where the clothes of little girls were stored before they would be turned into little sisters. This is a harrowing image, reminiscent of concentration camp scenes. The Big Daddy suit also gives us 25% resistance to all damage, the game tells us, in preparation for the final boss fight, presumably. We find one of those rare audio diaries by Andrew Ryan, where he is questioning himself if maybe he has also done some wrong things in his life. The last level in Bioshock is the Proving Grounds, where newly minted Big Daddies would train on how to protect little sisters while they are gathering Adam. This seems more like a filler level, to be honest, as the storytellers seem like they did not know what to do with the third act to make it more poignant. I like the first part of Act 3, showing us Apollo Square and giving us a glimpse onto what might have happened prior to our arrival in the city. What this level does tell us though is that even if the little girl we are protecting to open doors for us is not a little sister anymore, her mental conditioning denies her freedom and she stops at every corpse as if she is still gathering Adam. This is after all a reflection of the protagonist's condition, of Jack's condition. Now willfully turned into a Big Daddy, even if he keeps his freedom to choose, his mental condition stops him from making any choices of his own at all. On a meta level, this is also a reflection of the condition of the player themselves, as they can only push the roller coaster set out for them further by progressing the story as intended by its creators. The player is only following orders with no real power to choose, his only option being to exit the game and never play it again, or to do as he is told in order to experience the story and finish the game. This is quite profound and part of the reason why the "would you kindly" phrase was so successful, entering the gamer culture. It struck a chord, resonating with players worldwide. The final boss fight with Fontaine himself, kind of a botched experience. It was required by publishers, kind of a pointless addition. We have several phases, between each of them we need to drain Fontaine of Adam, then he switches to either Electro Bolt or Fire Plasmids while his Splicer's army is attacking us. It seems a little forced and unnecessary. At the end he is attacked by the little sisters who drain him of Adam with their little syringes. Hey, it's there and gives us closure at least, but Ken Levine also stated in the director's commentary that 2K, the publisher, requested a final boss fight from the developers, from Irrational Games. Another and the only other thing requested by 2K, according to Ken Levine, was that the game have two endings, a good and evil ending. So there are two endings to Bioshock, the good and the evil version, depending on the player's choice of either saving or exorcising the little girls they encounter throughout the game, or just killing them off. Ken Levine stated that he would have preferred a single ending, expounding on the moral ambiguity of every choice in life, and how nothing is ever purely good or evil in and of itself. The good ending is the Disney ending, and the most satisfying one, as Jack reaches the surface together with the little sisters he saves, who are now normal little girls. The girls grow up and go through the usual stages in life. They get married and have children of their own. In them, Jack finds the family he never had and craved, and dies happily of old age surrounded by his daughters. The evil ending was heavily criticized, and I guess it would have been more inspired. Jack basically takes Fontaine's place, and after overtaking control of Rapture, his lust for more power extends towards the surface where, together with an army of Splicers, manages to steal an atomic bomb, mankind's, worst secret, or the surface's worst secret back in that day and age. I believe Bioshock could have went better with a single ending, no matter the choices, as this goes well with the overall theme of the game, that the player has no choice in the end, no matter the choices made. I guess the ending video doesn't matter after all, as this great story is told throughout the game itself in an interactive way that involves the player at every twist and turn. So, we're done with the Bioshock story. Some conclusions from my part. Bioshock story is considered one of the best one written for the video game medium. The mix of Ayn Rand's political philosophy with the human hubris leading to tragic consequences in an utopian/dystopian underwater city with a strong film noir vibe to boot is truly unique to the medium. The meta of the "would you kindly" mind control phrase sparks deeper questions regarding what good the illusion of choice is if the player has no choice whatsoever when it comes to their actions changing the narrative altogether. The lack of meaningful choice stares the player in the face throughout the entire game, even by looking at Jack's wrists, who have a chain tattooed on them, symbolizing that the player's and Jack's hands are tied. This lack of freedom of choice has become somewhat of a meme in the world of Bioshock, and we see many references to it put in by the developers themselves in Bioshock Infinite as well. It does seem that the final story act, Act 3, was made without as clear an idea as the first two acts, as the big reveal at the end of Act 2 was also tough to beat, really. I have enjoyed seeing the residential area of Rapture and exploring the ruined homes of some of the characters we interact with in the game. I'm not sure I care much about Big Daddies anywhere in the game, so I kind of played the last part where we have to look like a Big Daddy, just out of curiosity to reach the conclusion of the story, and it kind of felt lackluster to me personally. It did feel a bit as if there was still 1/3 left of the story to be told and 1/3 of playtime left to be filled out, and that the story team ran out of more engaging ideas. However, it did not feel rushed in the slightest, just not as inspired as the first 2 acts. Again, these first 2 acts are hard to beat. The final boss fight also felt out of place, really, and I'm glad that Irrational Games did not think of a similar approach with one final boss at the ending of Bioshock Infinite. But I'm getting ahead of myself, and we'll have more time to talk about Bioshock Infinite in another video. Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes my analysis of the Bioshock narrative and story design. I hope you have enjoyed this journey for Rapture as much as I did making the video, and that you've come out with something you didn't know or didn't think about yet by viewing this gargantuan video. Thank you for watching until the end. If you like this video and want to see more content like this, let me know in the comment section, and would you kindly subscribe and hit the bell button icon to receive notifications when the next video will come up. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care. Bye bye.